Hello, everybody. So welcome back to week 2 for our introduction to game development class. We're under tight time constraints, and one of the biggest things about game development is that it can be very time consuming. Right before the recording started, I think some of y'all were already on Zoom call, probably already mentioned it. There was a comment about how the questions in the textbook can be very long. You do not have to write a super long essay. Just a paragraph, maybe two. Try to be somewhat thorough, right? We want to think and put plenty of thought into the process, but you don't have to go super long, right? Those seem like things that you could do a massive thesis on. So one of them was observe people playing the game, and you don't have to sit there and watch somebody play a game for 5 hours, right? Watch somebody play a video game for 5 minutes, and you have the basic idea of what they're doing with their controls, right? Which ones are moving, jumping, and you can reach out into the non-video game things too, right? Just the concept of gaming in general still obviously applies to video games. So if it's easier to come up with an example, what I've seen before is like changing things up. And I remember one that was really good was somebody did basketball, only like football or rugby, where it's one play at a time. It's not constantly running, right? The one team has the ball and they make their play, and then everybody steps aside and comes back for the other team's one single play. Basketball would be a very different game that way. So it doesn't necessarily have to be video games. I've seen some others like small puzzle games. Think about that. One that's come up a lot is things like chess shows up a lot anytime it's talking about the questions or has in the past. There's questions about like strategy games. That's a good example. So what if there was a more strict time limit so that it had to be constant action? You only had like a 1 second move, 1 second to make your move, otherwise you lost your turn on chess. And that's more like very action based. You'd still have the strategy and stuff, but again, a very different game.
Chess.
Yeah. Yeah. An upper limit, and you just lose your turn altogether. Or another one I saw that sounded really good whenever it was described in the assignment in previous semesters was do chess like Battleship, where each player has their own chessboard, and you can't see the other player's pieces. So you have to move your pieces around, hoping that you're moving towards them, and try to figure out where their pieces are along the way, which would be extra hard. I thought that sounds like it would make it really, really long, way, way longer than chess games can be anyway, because you'd have to figure out where they're at and where they're moving to and all of that stuff. And
that make it almost impossible to a certain extent.
It'd be very difficult. I didn't try to play it, but it sounded interesting when it was written up. But you don't have to go super in depth, just a paragraph or two. We are under tight time constraints. Might as well do this. Does everybody know the calculation of like how much time you should expect to spend on each class? As far as like why, so right now, week classes. Let me let him in here. So what his name is Liz. So this is a traditional thing. So traditionally, courses ran on 16-week courses. Traditional, and Ivy Tech was always 16 weeks, but with other schools, we'd say 14 to 16-week courses. That was the length of a semester, depending on the school. And then the courses are listed in credit hours. So for example, most courses are going to be 3 credit hours. 4 or 5 credit hours are generally much, much larger classes. So for your time on task calculation, time on task, the traditional measurement was double your credit hours outside of class. Or classroom. Am I still on the board here? Yeah. So
Per what?
per week. And this is still the 16-week classes. So if you're in a 3 credit hour class, we double that. So 3 times 2, and you expect to spend 6 hours studying. Right? Maybe not writing out the answers to your homework, but reading, writing out the homework, maybe just staring off into space, processing the information. 6 hours should be the expectation, plus the 3 hours in class would give us, is that 9 hours per class per week? However, Ivy Tech now does 8-week courses. So now that we're in 8 weeks, we need to double that. So the 3 credit hour class, we should, in our class here, it's 3 credit hours. So the traditional measurement of doubling that, figure 6 hours work for every hour spent in the classroom, but we're doing it in twice as much time. So double that again, up to 12 hours, plus the 8 hours we spend in class, because this is a 3 credit hour, 4 contact hour course. And expectation is 20 hours a week spent on the course. And game development is very, very time consuming. So please make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time, especially on the tutorials. Following the tutorials, has anybody been working on those? Okay, I see a couple head nods in the class. So my general estimate is that you're about an hour and a half, 2 hours into the first tutorial at this point. I did go way under this number, but that's why 2 classes is considered full time. Right? If it's 16 to 20 hours for each class, we take 2 classes, and that's 36 to 40 hours. So that's where the full-time label comes from. And it's not that many hours sitting there filling out your homework, because that would include the time you're just processing the thoughts. You're somehow working on class, reading stuff, looking into other material, brainstorming ideas for projects, stuff like that. But that's a general estimate on what your time on task for a class should be. And in our class, we are in a very time heavy one. Game development just takes a while. It's not complicated, as you'll see after we've seen it a few times. By the time we get to like maybe the 3rd tutorial, follow along tutorial in our in-class examples, you'll notice some patterns forming, and we never do much because games are running at 140 frames per second. So we just do a little bit in each one of those frames, and it adds up over time. But there's a lot of stuff we'll have to do along the way. But make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time. That's why those tutorials are due every other week, because it takes a while to do those. I did switch the game engine that I used from previous semesters. I believe we've talked about that before. And I'm still working on picking out a tutorial for the 3D section, which will be weeks 7 and 8. There's one that I really, really like. They provide all the art assets, and then you follow along the video on YouTube for making a 3D role-playing game. So a really awesome game. It's 5.5-hour video, which seems quick because I made the same thing over the summer, and I had 45 10 to 15-minute videos. I was trying to get ready for the summer camp. We ended up in a week-long summer camp with high schoolers and middle schoolers, some of which had never done any programming before at all. We made an open world 3D game and get up. And when I was getting ready, I went ahead and did everything that I wanted to do And they came out as like 45, 10 to 15-minute tutorials. So mine was longer than that. I found this one, but I also included making the art and all sorts of, and some other things as well. But 5.5 hours, and I really, really like this one, and I'm having trouble finding other ones that are full game tutorials. Everything else I'm finding, it's like they put a cube there and show you how to make a first person movement, and then not the rest of the game. So it is one that's a game. But that number I just wrote up on the board, right? 5.5 hours spread over 2 weeks is quite reasonable, right? I really, really like that tutorial. I have a feeling y'all would like to make a 3D role-playing game. Remember, your project, you're just doing a proof of concept. And we'll be finished with the book assignment by then. So all it will be is that. So I'm still looking for tutorials, but just to let you know, I might go with that one, which is 5.5 hour tutorial. And in that case, I would remove the other things like the customizations. Ask you to put cutscenes on there, just like something to introduce the story. We'll talk about storytelling at some point because that's really what we're doing, right? We're using the game to tell a story. We'll talk about some of that, but cutscenes and the other story and extra customizations, we'd remove that and just follow that tutorial. I see what's going on. But I'm still looking for other ones because I would like to find something more in the 2 or 3 hours at most range. It's spread out over 2 weeks, and if it's a 3-hour video, by the time we pause it, write some code, unpause it, and keep doing that, it's going to add quite a bit of time, right? So 5.5 hour follow along would probably end up being like 10 or 11 hours of work at the upper end. Maybe not that long. In our modern world, y'all are probably typed along with a YouTube tutorial without pausing it before, right? Have they done that? You use the pause button. Well, we'll see what it goes. I'm still looking for a tutorial, but just letting you know that I found that one that I really liked, which will probably be included as an option. So even if I find another shorter one, that full role-playing game will be enough. I'll make sure you have the link to that because that sounds like a fun thing to make, a nice thing to have in the portfolio. One note about submissions on those. Then we'll get started. Continue on of our example the other day. So with those tutorials that are due, if I open up Ivy Learn here. So for the first 2 weeks is the PyGame one. And those tutorials do use objects, just kind of follow along the syntax. We're going to see, I'm hoping to go over objects on Thursday and talk about that because I know not everybody has seen that. It's just an alternative syntax that consolidates things, and it's probably, if you haven't seen it yet, it probably makes it look confusing, but it's actually something that's better for the programmer. Like, it's way worse for the computer, but it's so much better for the programmer that we tend to always use it, especially in video games. Video games took object-oriented programming really, really quick. An alternate syntax thing. Click the button. Here's the first tutorial. PyGame, doing it all in script. There's a choice if you haven't looked at it yet. Hopefully you have. The reason there's 2 weeks is because it's time consuming and it's gonna take you a minute. So I'm kind of hoping you're about an hour and a half into the tutorials now, but don't panic if you're not that far into it. Just choose one of those. There's the assets, the basic categorical things, fortress defense, a small RPG battle thing, or a small platformer thing. Really, there's not much RPG in that. It's just 2 characters that swing swords at each other. I think the RPG refers to the art style the guy used, not necessarily it doesn't seem like a role playing game to me because it's just two characters. It's like a fighting game. It's two characters sitting there swinging swords at each other. We'll go through there, and then you'll add some customizations. Use those art assets to make some sort of like cutscene at the intro or outro. Just a small animation to practice with the storytelling parts. We'll talk about storytelling. I was hoping to get that in Thursday as well. But we need to get through a certain amount today before we get to all the stuff that I'm hoping to get in on Thursday. But just the basic tenets of storytelling. I think most people are familiar with at least the 3-act one, right? Introduce your characters, apply the story's main conflict, and at the end, either resolution or absolution. Resolution is when it resolves. Absolution is free from guilt. Not really wrapped up, but where we just call the story over. Absolution would be like the Die Hard movies. There at the end, it doesn't matter how much stuff he blew up or how much damage was done. Or Avengers are another good example. Doesn't matter how much damage was done or along the way, the bad guy was stopped at the end. So we absolve them of any guilt. Let's see what's in the chat. But add something, some little thing, right? It doesn't have to be good artwork. I do want to see some of your own artwork in the class. That's required on the final. And there is no quality standards on the artwork. So it does not have to be good artwork. I would like to see some of your artwork. So like if you do the Castle Defense one, for your cutscene wrap up, one of the cutscene wrap ups could be just draw a picture of a fire on top of the castle so it looks like it's burning down for a 30-second cutscene. That would obviously be the losing. Okay? Failed to defend the castle or whatever. So some little things and adding customizations. If you perfectly follow the tutorial, that's like a B. So to bump up to an A on the assignment, you'll want to do some of your own stuff. Oh, that was something else I was going to show on Ivy Learn. If I just go into the history, am I still find in there? Nope. I didn't even get to the main thing I was going to point at there. Got distracted. Sorry about that. And then down at the very bottom, you'll see for the submission, you'll take all the files that you use for making the game, all the images, all the scripts, everything involved, put it in one zip folder. Please keep it in the same order. So if you had it spread out organized nicely into a bunch of different folders, put all of those folders with that same hierarchical structure into the zip folder. So I can just open it up and run it. Put all of that in there and then make a video showing it running. And there's a thing, Canvas Studio built into Ivy Learn that you can use. Has everybody seen Canvas Studio before? So over in the green navigation links, you should see a button for Studio. There's also one in the course. I included both of them. If you go to Canvas Studio, there are the links on the left, buttons on the left. It'll open this, which is built in here, and you can see there's this record button. Just hit the record button. I can get Zoom thumbnails out of the way from the screen here. We don't need to see those. And choose to either do a screen capture or webcam. Pro screen capture. The very first time, it will need to download some software. And then after it downloads and you run the installer, which I believe the installer, it just downloads and the installer automatically runs. Then you'll come back and hit the record button again. And when you launch it, This might mess up some on the Zoom call. Some little controls will pop up, which I think is not going to work right now because I'm on the Zoom call. Oh, there it is. Again, you can choose have full screen narration, so you can talk while you're doing it and describe. So if you add some customizations in, it's a good time to talk about the customizations you added in, and then just play your game for a few seconds. Make a recording of that. If you want to capture the computer audio, fairly straightforward. The both button, I think everybody's familiar with that. Look, if you want to be seen, right, put your thumbnail down in the corner talking while you're playing the game. Got your webcam there, but just take a screen capture and that will put it in Ivy Learn, and then you'll have this big library here with. I use it all the time. You can tell from those videos.
So we do that for we do that for the tutorial stuff.
Yes. Or any screen capture, right? Most computers have screen capture software built in these days. Well, a video. Yeah. So in most programming classes, a screenshot's probably enough. You can show your program running, but for a video game, we kind of need a video.
So when you go to download that app exactly?
So you can go to the studio, the link that says studio. There's one in the course and one for your overall Ivy Learn account. And then when you go to submit that, I'm going here.
Where do we go to download it? I'd like to get that.
Oh, when you go to studio,
yeah,
you see the button in the top left that says record. You just hit record like you're going to start a recording, and it will download.
Okay.
The first time. After you do it once, then it'll be there, and you just have to hit the record button, and it'll start recording. I have to go into student view. I don't have a submit button. So whenever you go to submit that, you'll notice there's a tab here that says studio. So if you click on that, which I'm on the test account, so I can't see my library, but you'll see all the videos to keep taking with Camera Studio right there. Leave student view, which actually works in like anytime there's that's available anytime there's a text editor. So like over in the discussion boards, if I was to click the reply button here in the text editor where I'm on my account, if you go over to the little plugins and view all, you'll see there's lots of apps built, lots of plugins we can use right in that if you've never seen it before. But down near the bottom is studio, and you can just choose to embed one of your videos right in the discussion board. That will also be useful when we get to the final project to like share with your classmates. You can just do your final project as a video and then embed use Canvas Studio to make a presentation of it, and then embed that in the discussion board for sharing with classmates. Which I think is a very small point value. In previous semesters, people seem to want to skip that one. But it's built, screen capture software built right in there. Cancel that. There's actually one called Webcast-O-Matic. They have a free version that puts a little watermark on there. And then they have a paid for version, which has lots and lots of nice features on it. It's the paid for version. So it was also included in those fees. Right? All the fees that come with school tuition, a little bit of it went to pay for that. So might as well use it if we paid for it, right? But most computers these days have screen capture software in them, so you can just use whatever you have available. But I want to see the game run, and then when you submit it, I will download it. I do download and run them. So for our class example, which is quite a bit simpler than the tutorials, because we're looking at the concepts, trying to talk about the concepts of what we're doing more. something with a background, and then maybe like something we can interact with, maybe a treasure or something, coin to pick up, a treasure box to collect, and then a score to go up. Just some basic features for us so we can see the interaction and then the basic idea of it. And then tutorials are very much follow along. So, right, they have all the code there and they talk about the code while they're typing it. So we'll see that. I want to get through at least some sort of interaction with things, maybe a little bit on backgrounds, and put a score, some sort of HUD, probably just a score for our thing here because we're under tight time constraints. I want to do that today. And then on Thursday, I'd like to look at a couple other things if possible. We were using SVG graphics so that we can quickly animate them. So I'd like to see the 2D animations, maybe talk a little bit about object-oriented programming and talk a little bit about storytelling, which the storytelling thing is going to kind of stretch out over the semester. Some basic ideas from that. So I guess we should probably review where our thing was that other day. So we drew one image so far, just player, and got him on the screen. Let me open this. I'll just use basic idle, the one that comes with Python, but we can. Whoops, apparently I opened the wrong thing there. Open with. I'll go to more and edit with idle. I don't know why the button's not available on the Windows 11 shorter menu, but make this a little bit smaller so that everything is on the screen. There we go. So the basic structure that we do over and over again, we initialize everything, and then we go into an infinite loop. Right? We just have this variable set to true, and then while that variable, so while true means we're never going to leave this loop. With a lot of people just go ahead and write while true there, but then there's not a graceful shutdown. The first thing we do is check for any user events. And notice the structure here. We just have a smaller nested loop. We'll look at every event the computer knows about, and then we'll just start checking with selection structures to see if it's the one we care about. And that actually sums up game development quite a bit. We do all our initializations, put everything in place, and then we go through and just do some sort of selection structure to check the state of events to see if it's any of the ones we care about. Did the move button get pressed? That's what we have on here so far. But later, did our player bump into the opponent character, or fall in a hole? Or we want to check all of those things that could possibly happen so that we figure out what to do next. And there's a lot of things that could possibly happen. So there's the time consuming part of game development. Thinking about all those things that could possibly happen in every pass of the frame. And I guess then, like, if these were all ifs, so we want to be able to include some buttons, but not others. Actually, they don't necessarily all have to be if, because W and S, we shouldn't be hitting those at the same time. We might hit W and A at the same time to go off at an angle. But we probably wouldn't want to hit the up and down at the same time. That's just kind of confusing. So some of those should probably be else, which would require a different structure. We might get around to fixing that. But remember to think about things like that. In our case, I think if will be okay. This isn't a high stakes game yet. Right now we just have the background filled in. We'll kind of make a scene, some sort of background image that we can put on there. Then we use block transfer to place that player sprite somewhere on the screen. Update our display and then set the frames per second, which can be dynamic. So depending on what we're doing here, we could build up a different value and switch that out periodically throughout the game. It doesn't have to be, in this case, 60 frames per second from the time the game starts to the time the game ends. Some things could go as low as 12 frames per second, like in a cutscene, or we just need a basic animation and there's not interaction or anything to deal with. It could get up to like 200 frames per second, or what's the number we use? 210, 220? Does that sound familiar? 60, 140, then 220.
I don't know what the highest end stuff is.
Yeah, I don't do the high end stuff very often. It shows up in VR stuff. So I know somebody in the chat room mentioned VR, so we might do. As time allows, when we get to 3D and Godot, we might do some VR stuff. At least very basic.
Right now, VR is that might be made up. Right now, VR is really close as far as what hardware can support and what software can support. So.
Actually, it's been standardized. That's you'll remember about a year and a half ago where they talked about Facebook laid off 11,000 people. So they hired 43,000 programmers to standardize VR. It's called OpenXR. So augmented reality and virtual reality should be standardized right now. So the only exceptions are hardware that was around before that. And the popular ones did update. So like Valve's VR system updated when they did that. So the hardware, it's kind of all over the place, but for the most part, it is just the same as your phone or tablet. The Android one is just an Android device. So actually, any application that runs on Android will run on all of the non-Apple ones. And anything that runs on an iPhone will run on the Apple. The obvious extension there. Obviously, we can't mix and match them. Someone took me by surprise because I always hear gamers talk about it. But it is kind of nice for business settings. Like I got it thinking game development, and then learn that anything that runs on an Android device will work. So for like business settings, if you need a distraction-free environment, it's a great place to work on spreadsheets. Put on some noise canceling headphones. You can't see or hear anything outside of that little environment.
There's a lot of things that exist on it, both in all manner of things.
Yes, so we'll probably will see that soon, and that standardization for compiling and building it to run on a VR system is all built into the game engines. So all we have to do, we put together a 3D game like normal for a first-person view. So obviously, it wouldn't make sense to have the third-person view on VR, but a normal first-person view game with a slight adjustment for like the controllers and things. Obviously, they're a little bit different, but it's not significantly different than any other controller. We just set up our input manager and tell our input manager that it's VR controllers is one of the options. And
thankfully, the way I'm seeing most like 3D stuff, it's because it's with that skeleton, it's pretty easy to transition between something like that or VR. So you just instead of having it tied to animations, you just say use the input from the various gadgets they have.
Yes,
there was a thing I heard a while back that people were trying to create a mod for certain games, and I think it was Unity, because Unity has I forget which version of it has built-in VR capabilities.
Most game engines do. So
it was specifically with Unity. I forget which one it was, but anything that was on that specific version of Unity, the idea was it would swap it from preset animations to that other control input. The idea of the mod. I never used it, but
I don't think Unity ever got their own one working, but Facebook standardized it so that they all use the ones Facebook built. So in Unity they just added the option to download the one OpenXR, which is standardized, which we also have in the Godot engine that we'll use. So it's exactly the same, because when we get to the end, we just say build this for VR. and then side load it. I actually got approved for equipment purchase for a VR lab. So about the headsets, I don't know when the purchase is going to go through and when they're going to be delivered. Be nice. I'm hoping that it'll be here before December. Although we are a little bit in tight spatial constraints here in the classroom. A lot of things to bump into.
What headset did you
The Meta ones,
get? 2 or 3?
the latest one.
3.
3 point something, yeah. So yeah, it's very, very similar. We just upload it on like we would any tablet or phone, and it works. Hopefully we'll have time to do that. At the very least, I will bring in one of my I'll bring in one of my headsets and go through the steps in class. Whenever high schoolers come in, that's one of the regular presentations that admissions likes to have me give. Is the standard example is a bowling game and doing it in about 25 minutes. So make a bowling game, and we can easily, hopefully, fit that in our class here. At least we won't omit it. That's for sure. I don't know how much we'll be able to do, and I am kind of hoping that they get delivered by. Yeah, the valve index is a nice one.
You physically couldn't do that because you'd have to have all the base stations and stuff.
Yeah, you have to have other stuff, but
Meta is the only, as of right now, Meta, and I think that's actually one of the only ones. There's a couple, but there's very few that have the capability of standalone.
yes. So the index will work. What we'll see in class when we get to Godot near the end, that's a drop down menu, and Meta the Meta Quest and the Valve Index are both on that drop down menu. So it's like that easy. It's like, which one do you want to put it on? Otherwise, making the game parts the same. So back to making games. That's just preview. It fits in here. I'm hoping we'll have some equipment and can actually use it, but there's not much room in this computer lab to be doing VR stuff without bumping into something. So might have to go in the hall or something. But that's for the future. That basic structure, that's what we have. Initialize, loop forever.
Yeah, we'll say at least with the Quest and most of them, they have play area that you set up. So you can even that space over there, put a wall up where it tells you you're getting out of the area.
Oh yeah, we have to set that up, but I'm hoping to have an empty room at some point in the future. There's a couple things that used to be offices that aren't going to be needed once the construction's done. So I'm hoping to get one of those for a VR lab. So here's what we got the other day. We got our image on there, the characters moving around, and we just threw some green stuff in the background. Because remember, when we draw the image in a different place, it doesn't erase it. So that was just kind of a temporary filler. Let me move this out of the way. I don't need to see all this. Make that side small. There we go. We just threw this line in for like a little green background. Somebody mentioned this the other day. I always put several comment symbols. Over the years, I found that's useful because it's really, really easy to bump the backspace or delete or something to make one of them disappear. So extra comment symbols are nice. If I run that, that background was just block transfer. We moved the stuff around, but it doesn't necessarily end. It doesn't clear out. We just moved those pixels to a different spot. They're still showing in the previous spot. I mentioned remaking old games. You might notice how that would go a long way towards making the snake game. Just don't erase it. Don't erase or restrict the erase, how much gets erased. So I guess the next thing is we probably want an actual background, not just that solid color. Because I also wanted to do some other stuff. So I'm going to open Inkscape back up and do another picture. In particular,
So that I wanted to ask for Inkscape, is it possible to import other images into what you're currently making? And like if you just keep reusing the same asset over and over in that image or whatever?
Yes. There's lots of different ways that you can import a ping and work with that as a ping. It gets a bit problematic to do that in SVG. It would be easier to do it in the game engine. To just have it separate and then bring it into the game engine and use it there. Which is kind of what's going to go on here. So I want to make a background tile. Could do a solid background, but I wanted to do something with the tiles. So I'm going to draw. I'm just going to grab like the little calligraphy pen here. Let me see which one button I'm clicking on. This one allows us to draw straight lines. This icon here, and then you choose the fourth option up at the top, and we can draw a bunch of straight lines, and when we put them back together, it'll form something. So
When I said interrupt me, I meant like for this background, so you make like a tree or two, and you just want to put them into here.
Oh, okay. You can also copy and paste. Let me draw a random shape here. So maybe this is going to be a rock on our background. If you go to the arrows, you can select it and Control-C and Control-V or copy and paste. Is that what you're looking for? And you can paste. So if you draw a tree, then you can paste a whole bunch of trees in there.
I actually, because I was playing around with a couple of objects, so I was like, can you somehow toss them into this particular object or
Import.
Import them?
Yes.
And that'll just compile them.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll want to play around with it. There's a lot of options on how you import it. And it's getting a little more advanced, but under pad, you can trace it out as a bitmap, trace a bitmap in order to turn it into SVG. But you might lose some quality, and it also takes a lot of processing to turn that into SVG graphics. Once you have the final version, it takes a lot to pull all the pieces back out and separate them. Mm-hmm. But that's built in there. I think for your case, you probably just want the import button. Mm-hmm. You just choose the image import. So I'm going to draw maybe some squares. And I'm not going to go to the whole area. So I'll do something like that. Ultimately, I'm looking for about halfway across. Not quite half, but I was looking. So you see the area that our image is going to be. I was looking for about half, the upper left quadrant. So halfway across, halfway down, which can be resized, so won't be a big deal. And then I'll just choose some green, a dark green, maybe change it up a little so it's not a dark green, something like that. That'll work. And then if we're, I'll go back to the pin now. So that's just sort of a box.
How do you change the bounds again of that? What the image is?
In the document properties. Right. So file, document properties. But we can do that at the end as well. So for now, you can just do a regular box. Because I don't want a 512 by 512 image. That's pretty big. I'm gonna do something that's like a pad. Right. So I'm just gonna grab this little pin one and come over here and make something that looks like sort of a path that characters could walk on. So it's like roadways or something. And back over here. And maybe I'll make the path brown. Not that shade of brown. Something like that. So there's just kind of the idea of a path and that, but not necessarily an entire huge background. Because now we can use that copy and paste thing and fill it up. So I'm gonna like grab all of those and just do Control C and Control V to copy and paste. And we rotate this around, things should line up. Those on the left and right side match up. That's how we'd kind of set up tiles. I was planning on doing it a couple times. This one's a little bit off. You see now the right side no longer lines up with the left side, but because of that angle going down, it's something you want to get some practice with. For a random background, I think I'm going to go over to Microsoft Paint and just do something random now and go over that process again because it's easier here. Does everybody have, yes?
I was just wondering, so you know how like games, whenever you go to like the far side of the screen, it'll like switch it.
Mhm.
What is that possible?
Yes. So we would just do that in the code. So we'll set a point. So I'm expecting around here in a few minutes, we'll take a break and then we'll come back from break. And it's going to be like the first thing we look at after a break. So when we see collisions, we just set a point on the collision. So whatever our screen was, let's say it's 100 pixels, 100, because that's easy to talk about. When we get to 90 pixels, when our character is at 90 pixels, so almost at the end, then we move all the background over and show the next one. Or same thing going down. If it's like 50 pixels tall, when we get down to say 45 pixels, then the character stops moving and the whole screen moves down to show the next thing. So we just set up something in the code to check the character position and decide if we need to move back. Because we could keep the character in the very center of the screen the whole time and move the background instead. That looks like movement just as well, right? So there's lots and lots of options. Anything we've seen should be, yes, definitely possible. Some things are a little bit more time consuming. That would be that's the difference, how much time it takes to do it. And when we get to the other engines, like starting next week, we'll have engines that we're not doing it entirely in code. And most of these things are just tools built into our GUI that we can work with. It's much easier to do it there. So we will see it in a couple times. Since you've asked, I'll try to make it a point to show that a couple times. So I'm going to make a small box here. I'll forget that. And I'm just going to do some random green and browns. Does everybody have something basic like Microsoft Paint? And if we don't need any transparency for our background, right? That's as basic as it comes. So we don't want to, sometimes we do want to draw an entire big background, but we might not always want to draw an entire big, huge background. We want the little tiles to work with. Pieces of a background that go together. Actually, a couple of the game tutorials this semester are like set up that way. We don't draw the whole background. We do pieces that fit together. So what you need to do is just make sure that the sides line up like they're supposed to. That's just copy and paste, right? We have whoops. We just copy and paste that left-hand side and do the mirror image over on the right-hand side. And now we know those tiles will line up that way. Or for a background, I'm just going to draw some shapes on here. I'll grab a square and then switch it up so that no outline, but fill it with some pattern. Crown might look good. I'll fill it with crown and grab some random brownish color to represent dirt and work. Oh, whoops. It's Microsoft Paint. So the bottom color is the fill color. And I'll just kind of put that on there, deselect it, and then do another one with like a green color. Some random green color to kind of look like plants or something. That'll work. And just offset a little so that there's some sort of a pattern going on. make a good background. I don't want to spend a lot of time with it because okay, that green it looks very, very bright on the TV in front of me. It's not so bright on my screen, but I'm gonna go with it because we'll probably do something else very quickly too. Some of what I wanted to show was just the quickness. I'm going to hit Control A to select all of that. Normal select all, then copy, Control C, and I'm going to switch the background color to white, and then make this wider. Oops. Make sure to deselect it. Make that wider, and then paste in a copy of that. And if we in the horizontal direction now, instead of those tiles to line up. Did somebody ask a question? I couldn't quite hear you. Nope, looks like everybody's muted. I thought I heard something for a second, but apparently not. So now those tiles line up on the left and right side now. So we have that little image and we can place them right next to each other. We can do the same thing for the top and bottom. So I'm going to Control A, just the normal select all, copy, deselect it, and then make it a little bit taller so there's some room. Paste that in and flip that vertical. That gets us a nice little starting tile to work with. Some sort of background tile, probably not the finished perfect version. In the finished polished off version, you'd probably want to just have that very edge is the only thing that you worry about lining up. And the internal spill for each one. You have to watch about duplicates and stuff, but that gets us something quick to work with. Like you saw how quickly that one went together. What is it right now? It's 261 by 258. It's pretty big. I'm going to select the whole thing and drag it down to something more like 64 by 64. Or something like that. And the same thing with the canvas, so that way it's down small. Actually, I can use Inkscape to polish that off. So that gets us a little tile that lines up on the left and right side, top and bottom side, so we can get a good background. So I'm going to save this under Documents, and this will answer your question too, Brady. I'll put it in the same thing. That images folder, I'll call it back tile, background. Yeah, I'll just call it background. I can open that in Inkscape. It defaults to working with looking at why is that looking at OneDrive? It defaults to working with SVGs, but it can work with other image types as well. So I open that up here and basically import the image. It's zoomed way out, but notice the size. Now I can come up here and just type in the exact size I want. So this is why I do include, part of the reason I do include images here is we do sometimes still have to set our image size. So now it's set to 64 by 64. I need to make that just a touch smaller. So it fits in that area. And the tile should line up, but actually I think I messed that up. Let me, I apparently messed something up. Open that with paint and let me fix it first. Sorry. See where I got a little bit off there in that last copy and paste? Not undo it this way. Can't really undo. So what I'll do is I'll do the editing here. Sorry, I was talking and trying to do that at the same time, and notice how that one got a little bit off. There's just that blank space there. What I'm going to fix that is I'm just going to move this over a little bit past it. And since they did basically line up, I'm going to stretch this a little bit, try to stretch that a little bit, the same amount the other direction. Well, I messed that up. Sorry. That's part of the process. You'll want to do this, but see how quickly that went? Just to get something, the basic idea of a tile where they kind of line up. We're going to have a black gray in there. What I often do with these is I will make 5 or 6 in like 20 minutes and just choose the best one. It's not the final version, it's just a working one. But then we can do the same thing. I'll come over here and load in the image. Same thing we did for the sprite. So I'll say background sprite. Here's our PyGame library, has a module called image that has all of the methods for working with images in. Particular load one, and it's in the images folder called background.p. Okay. The coordinates on this one are a little bit different. Is that all I did there? Is for these, we can just kind of put them in. We have the value of our window size, so we can use that to calculate how wide we need to be or how tall we need to be, and just put a bunch of those images in. So I'm coming down here, and here's where our character's at, and it goes in order. So the first thing we draw, the last thing in our code is drawn on top of the first thing we draw. That makes sense? First line gets drawn, and then we draw stuff right on top of it. So to kind of erase that, make sure that we don't end up with the previous player position on the image still, we want to make sure and draw the background first. Which there's a bunch of them, so we just want to maybe do it as a loop. I'll just use I. That's the typical one for a for loop. For I and what do I do in the example? Just range? Yeah, that'll work. In range. Almost everybody said they'd seen Python before, right? Hopefully for loop looks familiar. So in the range 0, we'll start at 0, 0, which is our top left corner. And we want to go to all the way across the window. So we have our window size as a tuple. So the width of the window will be the first index in that. 0. And then our image was how big was the image? 60 by 60 wide by 61 tall. So while we're filling that up, we want to make our step size 60 pixels wide. That way, the width of our image. So from the start until the end of the, we'll place 1 at the start, and then when we come back around the loop, we're 60 units over, so that'll be at the width of our image. Same thing for the height. I'll always use J for the index. Those are in range start at 0. We're going to go to the size of our window, increase by 1. And this time we'll do a step size of 61. And eventually and then we'll just split each one of those images and it'll fill it out. I made that little error in there, but I don't want to waste a lot of our class time fixing an error. We talked about the process that flip it and then flip it again. Actually, I learned how to do that in a factory making, not for video games, in a factory making plywood for the interior of Oprah's plant. Really, really nice plywood. Black Ipe burl. So a burl is a tumor that grows on trees. And the black Ipe is a very, very rare tree from Africa. It's some of the prettiest wood I've ever seen, but it was a tumor that grows on the tree. So it was only like that big. But Oprah's private plane is huge. So we had to take little slices of the tumor and like put it together so that it looked like one solid sheet of wood covering the whole thing. Is where I learned how to do that. I never saw the finished product like after it was stained or something, but the wood looked good. The plywood we centered looked awesome. It was fireproof too. So making that, I did not know it was possible to make wood fireproof. Still worry about the chemicals they have me use on it, but I didn't know it was possible to make. I guess that's just something for people with money like Oprah. But now we'll do the same thing. We'll use the scene we're in, and block transfer our background sprite. Background sprite to those coordinates, which do have to go in a collection. I'll use square brackets. Normally, it would probably be better to use a tuple here because they use less RAM. But for clarity in the example, I'm going to use square brackets. So the numbers we're worried about are in that loop from I and J. And doing a tuple with parentheses would be better for RAM. We wouldn't be using as much RAM, but we're only making a small example here, so it's not going to matter. And I think it'll make it. That loop makes sense? I've seen looping before, right? At least have a basic idea of it. Hopefully that makes sense. We'll just go through our entire window size and keep putting those images on there. So now hopefully that's going to look a little bit well, they're close.
Yeah, we have to. It's stuck in. I have to reinforce it.
Yeah, so I made a typo. If that happens, I thought I could close the window and then get back to that error message. If that happens, we get an error message to say what it is. Just a little typo. Block transfer is BLIT. I'm not sure where the I comes from. Somebody put that in PyGame back in the late 1990s. It makes it pronounceable. We want to blit the image. A lot easier to say than block transfer. So I think that's why they did it.
Maybe, or maybe they had something else that was already ELT at the time.
Possibly. There is an independent thing there too. So it could stand for something with independent. Let's try that again. So save and run, which I'm just using the hotkeys for. So Control S and function F5. Or well, you can see the little black one. I guess it's not that bad there. Almost makes it look like we're in a forest or something. But see how the left and right and top and bottom of those pixels lined up? Looks a little funky on the screen, but we got some sort of alignment between all the pixels when we're moving. Yeah, it looks, almost looks like a tree line. Remember the Bob Ross thing, the happy little accidents, right? Just because it's not exactly what you had in mind beforehand doesn't mean it's going to look bad when it gets in the game. And our character moves down, and every frame of the game, we are still transferring those graphics into the position they need to be in.
Except for those happy little accidents.
And I guess it does give us a nice little grid to figure out where we're moving.
You can see in that gap, you can see some of your character through there or something.
Oh yeah, it's still showing up in that background.
Those are
So maybe filling that with blue. Looks like a tree line, it fits, yeah. I said it filled, in the chat, it looks like a tree line, so it kind of fits. I was thinking, I come over here and uncomment that line where we just did the solid color fill the other day. And maybe make that something blue. So like just a little bit of red, a little bit of green, and a whole bunch of blue. These are 8-bit numbers. So 0 to 255 red, 0 to or green, 0 to 255 blue. So now it's something blue, maybe it'll look almost like water there. Was my thought. She commented tree line, so maybe something green. And that way we don't end up with that. So now it looks like we're in a swamp or something. I don't know, maybe brown would be better. Brown is, close that. We can use a color picker. Google has a good color picker in it. If you just Google color picker, there's one right here. Just choose brown, that'll work. And it's this color, but we need it in the RGB one. So here it is decimal numbers, which is the same thing as those hexadecimal numbers. Everybody familiar with hexadecimal? It's how we read binary. Binary is just too simple for humans, so we read it 4 bits at a time. If we need to work in direct binary, like with colors, what pixels turn on, pixels turn off, address, machine addresses, we need to work in binary. All the ones and zeros are problems. So we read them 4 bits at a time, and just use base 16 numbering. 168, 107.50 is a brown. Maybe that'll go with what Grace said and make it look like a tree line. So I'll put that in as the color and give that another run. Oh yeah, that does look like a tree. I don't know what it looks like on your screen. On the TVs in here, it's really funky green, at least the one in front of me. It looks a lot better on my on the computer in front of me. But just pick some colors, get the character moving around, maybe draw a solid one. Last fall when I taught this, I did a very quick map that looked like the US, which I could do really quick here. So in a new Inkscape document, maybe an alternative when I'll grab that pencil again. I'm thinking we're going to run around and grab either treasure chest or coins. They're both pretty easy to draw and interact with. I did something like maybe a big blue square for ocean that takes up all the area, blue, and then come in with like a pencil and very quickly draw a picture of America, I guess Mexico, and South America. Doesn't have to be perfect. Something like that, and then there's the area where we run around and collect coins in or something. A really quick background, not the final version, but we need something to work with while the art department puts together the final version, right? So at the very least, you'll want that sort of art, like the ones that you draw in 30 seconds, and then tell the art department what size your image is so that they can, a professional artist can spend a long time making a really, really good image the exact same size as yours. Give it the same name, and then all you do is just swap the files out of the final draft.
I've seen some game developers will sometimes like release their development stuff, showcase them around thing. I've seen them reuse assets or whatever. Just so you'll see things flying and you're like, what in the heck?
Yeah, that's pretty common. Yeah,
There's some that's similar enough for them just to be throwing it around to see what the heck's going on.
Change colors.
Yeah.
That's especially common if you have something like birds, dragons. Just change the color of it in the new one.
Well, I mean, like they're testing stuff, like basically showcasing them using random assets and place them with the final product. You know, I've seen various videos of devs showcasing them experimenting with a new mechanic or whatever, and you see things that already exist in the game flying in weird ways, and it's like, huh.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's alternatives, and we have to have an image to work with. And the images are the same. So when we get that nice, really nice final version working with, that's the same as this one. So if they have the same name, all we have to do is swap out the resource, and the game will just load the different file. So I went ahead and saved that. I think we'll go with the one that's there, the tile one. So we should do one big one. This should probably, I guess, match the size of our thing. So I'm gonna select that and change starting 0, 0 and go 7, 7, 7 wide and 4, 4, 4 tall, because that's the size of the game we made. But we could make it bigger than the game too. Actually, for Gabe's question, could make it 3,000 wide and 2,000 tall. And then we have a big world that won't show all in our window at once. So we'll need to move if the character goes around. So I'll go ahead and save that really, really big to address your question, Gabe. And then this is SVG, so I do want to come over to document properties, it's one we saw the other day, and make sure I change the size of the file to whatever I just put there. I think 3,000 by 2,000. Yeah. So then we have a really big background that won't all different ways to do our background, but loading them in is essentially the same. The only difference is we wouldn't have to tile the really big background. We just put it in there once and then keep track of where we're at and what part shows on the screen. Which there's a couple of different ways to do that. We could have the screen move continually with us the whole time. We could keep our character right in the middle of the game. The arrow keys aren't on there. I was sitting there trying to push left and right. Could keep our character right in the middle and only move the background. That's an even easier, that might be an even easier one. When we push the W key, our background goes up and our character stays in the same spot. It'll look the same. You want to try around different things like that. I think what you were referring to is like the original Zelda style. When the character gets to about here, everything pauses and then it moves to the next section. So we would just check those coordinates. 777 pixels wide, so maybe 750. When the character gets to 750, the game pauses, and then we slowly animate the thing moving over. So what I would do is set like Boolean, call it next scene or something, set to false. Then when our character, we're constantly checking the position. If position equals this, then we'll move. Let's do that after class. That still covers it after break. Because it still covers our collisions, checking for areas and stuff. And yeah, it answers a question that was asked directly. So I would rather do that than the lecture I had planned. Just make sure y'all know that you're free to ask questions when you have them in class. And we'll discuss and talk about things. This will be a good one to work into your example. So we'll switch over to the big one and do that. You'll see how to do the tile backgrounds, and we have lots and lots of different alternatives, but hopefully you're seeing some commonality there, how we get it on the screen. This one we had to do a loop. That was the expansion. We needed lots of little backgrounds. So we needed a loop to get them all on there, but we still did the exact same thing to get it there. And the way we loaded it in, we did the exact same thing to load it in. We're not controlling it, so we don't really need global coordinates for the background. I think we'll have to break. But 10 minutes sound good? I see head nods here in the classroom. So let's take a 10-minute break. My laptop says 2:15. So we'll get back to it at 2:25, and then we'll address Gabe's question of when we get to the end of the screen, then the background moves instead of continually moving and stuff. And that'll cover a few more points of covering a game. And see, there's lots of ways to put this together. And also let y'all make sure y'all see. You're free to ask questions and we can drift off lecture. Because we do not have enough time to talk about everything there is to know about game development. I have some stuff planned, but if you have questions, we'll talk about those because they still relate. I'll see y'all in just a moment. I'm gonna go get us a coffee. I'm thirsty. Stop the recording.